In hospital room 304, the air was heavy as if time had frozen. Only the steady beeping from the heart monitor echoed a faint reminder of life. Early summer sunlight filtered through white silk curtains, casting pale streaks across the cold tiled floor, where tiny scratches told silent stories of the passing days. Anna Harper lay at the center of the room, on a pristine white bed. Her pale blonde hair spilled softly over the pillow, eyes closed as if drifting in a dream she would never awaken from. Her skin was pale, but retained the graceful features of a woman who once turned heads. Her breath was weak, nearly blending into the sounds of the machines, as if she stood on the threshold between two worlds. Surrounding Anna was her family, but none of them were the focus of this moment. Her mother, Evelyn Harper, sat in a gray leather chair, hands tightly clasped the pearls around her neck, gleaming like armor shielding her from emotional chaos. Her hair was styled in a perfect bun, not a strand out of place, as though outward perfection could conceal inner pain. Her eyes were cold and fixed not on Anna, but on a random point on the white wall where a faded landscape painting hung crookedly. Her father, Robert, stood by the window, arms folded across his chest, his gaze fixed on the stream of cars in the parking lot below. He said nothing, but the slight hunch of his shoulders suggested the weight of an invisible burden. Anna's younger sister, Lily, sat curled in the corner, hugging her knees, her eyes shifting between her sister and the floor, as if searching for an unspoken answer. But at the center of this tense silence was not the Harper family. It was a black man. James Carter. He sat by Anna's bedside, the cheap plastic chair creaking under his weight. His eyes, gentle but heavy with exhaustion, never left Anna's face. The faint lines around his eyes told of sleepless nights, of long hours beside this hospital bed. But there was no bitterness in his posture. His hand held Anna's, his thumb gently stroking the back of her hand, where a simple gold wedding ring gleamed in the sunlight. That ring, small but radiant, was a silent declaration that her family seemed determined to ignore. James whispered, his voice deep and tender, as if meant only for Anna. "You've always been strong, Anna. You still chose your way, even when they didn't understand." His words melted into the room, but no one responded. Evelyn clenched the handbag on her lap, her diamond-ringed fingers digging into the expensive leather like she wanted to tear it apart. Robert gave a dry cough, breaking the silence, but his eyes remained glued to the window. Lily glanced up momentarily, her eyes brushing past James, then quickly looked down again, as if afraid to be caught curious about this man. The windowsill was crowded with fresh flowers, carnations, roses, and white lilies, sent by colleagues, neighbors, and friends. The sweet scent filled the room, but it couldn't mask the smell of antiseptic or the quiet presence of approaching death. Those bouquets, though beautiful, seemed like a desperate effort to soften the harsh reality. James paid them no attention. He ignored Evelyn's cold stare and Robert's indifference. His eyes were only on Anna, as if she was his entire world, and at this moment, she truly was. Evelyn finally moved. Her eyes flicked to James's hand, holding Anna's, and paused at the wedding ring on her daughter's finger. Her lips pressed into a stiff line, as if the presence of that ring was an offense. She turned away, but her hands trembled slightly, causing her handbag to quiver on her lap. No one said a word, but the silence in the room felt like a storm waiting for lightning to strike. James seemed to sense it, but he didn't react. He continued stroking Anna's hand, whispering, "They don't need to understand, right? You just needed to be yourself." The door creaked open. A nurse walked in with a clipboard. She checked the IV line, her gaze brushing over James with a soft smile. "Mr. Carter let us know if you need anything," she said warmly. Evelyn muttered under her breath, just loud enough for James to hear Carter. The name rang out like a question full of doubt. But James didn't respond. He leaned forward, and gently brushed a lock of hair from Anna's forehead. The wedding ring on his hand glinted in the light, a silent answer. Evelyn saw it. This time she couldn't hide her discomfort. Her lips trembled, but she said nothing more. The room fell silent again, filled only with the sound of machines and Anna's faint breathing. James remained by her side, eyes locked on her, as if love alone could keep her here. But deep in his gaze was a pain he couldn't hide, the pain of a man who knew this moment, though precious, would not last forever. And within the silence of the Harper family hung an unspoken question. Who is James Carter, and why is he here holding Anna's hand like she is his whole world? Pause for a moment and think. Have you ever wondered what love looks like when faced with judgmental eyes? Some people like James and Anna love, despite every obstacle from racial prejudice to family silence. They remind us that love doesn't need the crowd's approval, but courage. Today, try to open your heart. Listen to the stories around you. Ask yourself, could you miss a genuine love because it doesn't fit your mold? The story of James and Anna is only beginning, and it invites you to discover more. The hospital room remained engulfed in heavy silence, broken only by the steady beeping of Anna Harper's heart monitor. The early summer sun had now climbed higher, casting longer rays through the white silk curtains, highlighting specks of dust floating in the air. On the hospital bed, Anna lay motionless, her pale face still retaining a gentle elegance, as if she were in a deep, endless dream. Her breathing was so faint, it was almost imperceptible. Only the gold wedding ring on her finger shimmered under the light, a quiet reminder of a secret the room seemed desperate to ignore. James Carter sat beside the bed, the plastic chair creaking every time he shifted slightly. Large and warm hands clasped Anna's tightly, his thumb gently caressing the back of her hand, where the thin skin revealed delicate blue veins. He never took his eyes off her. His gaze was tender, but exhausted, as if the long days at her bedside had drained him entirely. The lines around his eyes deepened under the light, telling stories of sleepless nights, of long, silent hours of waiting. Yet there was no resentment in his demeanor, only devotion, quiet, steady, like an ember that never goes out. You've always been strong, Anna. He whispered, his voice low and gentle, as if only she could hear. Even when they didn't understand, you still chose your path. You never needed their permission. His words dissolved into the air, but Anna didn't respond. She couldn't anymore. Yet that didn't stop James. He leaned forward, his short, curly hair brushing lightly against her forehead, and added softly, I'm here, just like you always wanted. I need you to know that. Around them, the Harper family seemed to exist in a different world. Evelyn, Anna's mother, sat upright in her leather chair, her hands tightly interlocked, the pearl necklace around her neck gleaming like a barrier separating her from reality. Her hair was pulled into a flawless bun, not a single strand out of place, a symbol of the control she imposed on everything, even her emotions. But her eyes, cold and judgmental, constantly flicked toward James, stopping at his hand holding Anna's. Each time her gaze landed on the wedding ring on her daughter's finger, her lips pressed tighter into a rigid line. She gripped her leather handbag harder, diamond-ringed fingers digging into the expensive material as if trying to tear it apart. The presence of James, a black man undeniably devoted, seemed like an affront to her, though she never said it aloud. Robert, Anna's father, stood at the window, arms folded across his chest, eyes fixed on the parking lot below. Cars came and went, but he didn't see them. His shoulders slumped, as if he were trying to hide from the moment, from the reality that his daughter was slipping away. Occasionally, he let out a dry cough, a brittle sound that broke the silence, but he didn't turn around or look at James or Anna. His indifference was a way to maintain distance, to avoid facing the question. Everyone else in the room was also avoiding. Who is James Carter? And why is he holding Anna's hand? Like she's his whole world. Lily, Anna's younger sister, sat curled up in the corner, arms around her knees, her eyes darting between her sister and the floor. She was the only one in the family who seemed curious about James, but that curiosity was suppressed by embarrassment and the invisible pressure from their mother. Once she looked up, her gaze brushing past James, just as he gently tucked a lock of hair behind Anna's ear. That gesture, small but filled with love, made Lily blink as if she had just seen something that didn't belong in the perfect family portrait their mother always painted. But she quickly looked down again, afraid Evelyn might notice. The windowsill was filled with flowers, red carnations, white roses, yellow lilies sent by colleagues, neighbors, and friends. Their sweet scent wafted through the room, but only emphasized the sterile smell of antiseptic and the quiet presence of death closing in. Despite their beauty, these bouquets felt like a futile attempt to cover the harsh truth. James didn't notice them. He didn't care about Evelyn's cold stare, Robert's indifference, or Lily's hesitance. He only saw Anna as if she were the only light in this room, and he was guarding that flame. Evelyn finally moved. She leaned slightly, pulled a handkerchief from her purse, and dabbed at the corners of her eyes, though no tears had fallen. The gesture felt performative, a silent assertion that she was suffering most in this room. She glanced at James, her eyes pausing at his hand where his wedding band sparkled, mirroring the one on Anna's finger. "Carter," she muttered again, voice low enough that only James could hear, but laced with suspicion and disdain. The name came out like an accusation, as if his presence was a mistake that must be corrected. James heard it, but said nothing. He lowered his head and gently pressed his lips to the back of Anna's hand, as if Evelyn's words couldn't reach him. The door opened softly. Another nurse entered carrying a fresh jug of water. She checked the IV line, her eyes briefly meeting James's with a gentle smile, as if she understood something the Harper family could not. "Mr. Carter, do you need anything?" she asked warmly. James shook his head, his deep voice steady. "Thank you. I'm fine." Evelyn gripped her handbag tighter, her nails digging into the leather. "Carter," she repeated, this time a bit louder, as if challenging his presence. But James didn't respond. He continued holding Anna's hand, whispering, "I'm here, Anna. I'm not going anywhere." The silence in the room felt like a taut string pulled to its limit, needing only the slightest pressure to snap. James knew it, but he didn't care. At that moment, he knew that no one else in the room truly knew Anna unlike him. He knew how she smiled when she woke in the morning, how she giggled at old comedies, how she squeezed his hand tighter on their worst days. He knew her, and that was the only thing that mattered. But deep in his eyes, beneath the steadiness, lay an unshakable pain, the pain of a man who knew their time was running out, and that her family, though present, had chosen not to see him truly. In the hospital room, the steady beeping of the heart monitor continued, like a sorrowful rhythm, blending with Anna Harper's faint breath. The early summer sunlight had now softened, casting pale streaks through the white silk curtains, highlighting the wedding ring on Anna's finger, glimmering like a silent reminder of an unspoken secret. James Carter still sat beside the bed, his hand clasping hers tightly, his thumb gently stroking the fragile back of her hand. Though heavy with exhaustion, his eyes never left her face, as if he could keep her alive with love alone. But in the room's stillness, James's mind drifted to memories of a love that once bloomed in secret, and the walls they could never tear down. 7 years ago, beneath the clear blue skies of Atlanta, James and Anna stood hand in hand in a small courtroom where sunlight streamed through the windows onto the worn wooden floor. In a simple pale blue dress, Anna beamed with a radiant smile, her eyes shining like stars. James felt his heart pound in a carefully tailored black suit when she said, "I do." That day they married without family, without a lavish celebration. Just two close friends as witnesses. The only ones who knew their love was real, despite every social barrier. James remembered how Anna squeezed his hand tighter when the judge pronounced them husband and wife, as if she feared the world would pull them apart. He had kissed her gently but fiercely, and they were the universe to each other. But their love was never allowed to be free. The Harper family, with their deep-seated racial prejudice, would never accept James, a black man, as Anna's husband. Anna had known that long before she met James in a small cafe where he worked part-time to pay for law school. She had been drawn to his warm smile, to the way he listened to her, as though she were the only person in the room. But she also knew her mother Evelyn, with her rigid ideas of what was appropriate, would never see James as a person, only as a color. Her father Robert, though quieter, was no different. His silence was simply complicity with his wife's bias. So Anna and James chose to keep their love hidden, not out of shame, but to protect each other from the wounds her family could inflict. James remembered when Anna would slip her wedding ring into her purse before visiting her family in Savannah. She would give him a strained smile and say, "It's just for now, James. One day I'll wear it in front of them." But he saw the pain in her eyes, the way she lowered her head when lying to her mother about being busy during Christmas or Thanksgiving. James accepted it not because he was weak, but because he loved her. He remembered one winter night when Anna returned from a family dinner with red-rimmed eyes and mascara smeared on her cheeks. She held him tightly, sobbing. "Mom asked me why I couldn't find someone more suitable. I couldn't say anything, James. I just wanted to protect you." He had held her and whispered, "I don't need their approval, Anna. I need you." Those memories flooded back sharp and vivid like an old film reel. James remembered their trip to Tybee Beach, where Anna had worn her wedding ring openly for the first time. She ran barefoot along the sand, laughing as the waves soaked her dress. "This is where we belong, James," she said, resting her head on his shoulder as the sunset painted the sky crimson. They carved their names into a wooden bench by the shore, a silent promise that their love would endure. But when they returned to Atlanta, the ring returned to hiding, and James became her secret again. He never blamed her, but each time she left to face her family alone, it felt like a part of his heart was being torn away. Back in the hospital room, James could feel Evelyn's eyes on him, sharp as a blade from across the bed. She clutched her handbag fingernails, digging into the leather, as if his presence was an unbearable offense. Robert stood by the window, coughing dryly again, but never turning around. Sitting in the corner, Lily looked up briefly, her gaze flicking to James, then down again as if afraid her mother might notice. James paid them no mind. He looked only at Anna, whispering, "You chose me, Anna, and I chose you. That's all that matters." But beneath his devotion was a pain he couldn't hide. James knew that Anna's family had never asked about her distant travels, absences during holidays, or the glow in her eyes when she returned from moments with him. They had never wanted to know who she truly was, and they had never wanted to know him. He remembered something Anna once said during a power outage as they sat beside a flickering candle. "If I told my mother about you, she wouldn't see you, James. She'd only see what she wants to see." He nodded and kissed her forehead, but his heart broke inside. Sitting at her bedside, he knew time was running out to speak the truth. But he was still holding her hand, honoring his promise for 7 years. The door creaked open, and a nurse entered with a fresh blanket. She looked at James with gentle eyes. "Mr. Carter, would you like to rest for a bit?" James shook his head, his voice steady and low. "I'm fine right here," Evelyn muttered under her breath, just loud enough for him to hear Carter. The name hung like an accusation but James didn't respond. He bowed, pressing his lips to the back of Anna's hand. His wedding ring shimmered silently, a wordless reply. In this room, among judgmental eyes and suffocating silence, James Carter was the only one who truly belonged to Anna. Hospital room 304 remained engulfed in stifling silence. Only the steady beeping of Anna Harper's heart monitor echoed through the air, a sorrowful rhythm, marking the passing of each moment. The early summer sunlight had faded, casting weak dim rays through the white silk curtains, illuminating the wedding ring on Anna's finger, glistening like a silent declaration that her family deliberately refused to see. James Carter still sat at her bedside, his hand firmly holding hers, his thumb gently stroking the fragile back of her pale hand, where faint blue veins were visible beneath the skin. Heavy with exhaustion, his eyes never left Anna's face, as if he were trying to etch every detail of her into his memory. But behind his devotion lay a deep pain, the pain of someone who knew that even as her family stood there, they had never truly wanted to understand her. Or him. Evelyn Harper, Anna's mother, sat upright in her leather chair, hands tightly interlaced, the pearl necklace around her neck, glinting like a suit of armor, protecting her from emotional chaos. Her eyes, sharp and judgmental, continuously flicked toward James, resting on his hand clasping her daughter's. Each time her gaze fell upon the wedding ring on Anna's finger, her lips tightened into a rigid line, as if the sight of the ring was an intolerable insult. She gripped the leather handbag on her lap more fiercely, her manicured nails digging into the material as though trying to release all her frustration. But she said nothing. Her silence was a weapon sharper than any word, and James could feel it, even though he let it wash over him without reaction. Robert, Anna's father, stood by the window, arms folded across his chest, eyes fixed on the parking lot below. Cars came and went, but he seemed not to see them truly. His shoulders were hunched, as if he were trying to avoid this very moment to run from the reality that his daughter was slipping away. Occasionally, he let out a dry cough, the brittle sound briefly breaking the silence, but he didn't turn around. He didn't look at James. He didn't look at Anna. His indifference was a form of self-protection, a way to avoid the question that loomed over the entire room. Who is James Carter, and why is he here holding Anna's hand like she is his whole life? Lily, Anna's younger sister, sat curled up in the corner, hugging her knees, her eyes flitting between her sister and the floor. She was the only one in the family who seemed curious about James, but that curiosity was suppressed by shyness and the invisible pressure from their mother. Once she looked up and caught a moment James gently brushing a lock of pale blonde hair from Anna's forehead. That gesture, small but filled with tenderness, made Lily blink, as if she had just glimpsed a missing piece that didn't belong in the perfect family portrait their mother had always painted. But she quickly looked away, afraid Evelyn might catch her, afraid to face the truth that her sister had lived a life they knew nothing about. The Harper family had never asked Anna about the times she was away. They had never wondered why she refused to come home for Christmas, always saying she was busy with work in Atlanta. They never asked about the distant trips, the glow in her eyes when she returned, as if she had just found a missing piece of herself. They never wanted to know who she truly was. And they had never wanted to know James. To Evelyn, Anna was the independent, successful daughter who needed no one but her family. She was a quiet pride to Robert, someone he didn't need to understand too deeply. To Lily, she was the distant older sister, always just slightly out of reach. But none of them realized that Anna had chosen James, a black man, to be her husband and true family. And she had paid for that choice with silence. James remembered a moment from years ago when Anna returned from a family dinner in Savannah. She walked into their small apartment, her eyes red mascara smeared across her cheeks. She collapsed into his arms, sobbing. "Mom started talking again about introducing me to someone. More suitable. I wanted to scream that I already have you, James, but I couldn't. I didn't want them to hurt you. James had held her tightly and whispered, I don't need their acceptance, Anna. I need you. But deep in her heart, he knew Anna longed for the day she could wear her wedding ring openly in front of her family and call him her husband without fear. He had made her favorite butternut squash soup, sat beside her on the couch, and let her cry until she fell asleep in his arms. That was how they lived, in quiet, hidden moments of love, in secrets only they understood. Back in the hospital room, James could feel Evelyn's eyes cold as a blade cutting into him. She leaned forward, pulling a handkerchief from her handbag, dabbing the corners of her eyes, though no tears were present. The act felt theatrical, a performance meant to affirm that she was suffering most in this room. Carter, she muttered, her voice low, but dripping with contempt, as though the name itself was a stain. James heard her, but he didn't respond. He bowed, pressing his lips to the back of Anna's hand. His wedding ring sparkled a wordless answer. He knew her family didn't want to see him. They didn't want to see the truth that Anna had chosen him, despite all their racial prejudice. But he also knew that at this moment, he was the only one who truly belonged to her. The door creaked open, and a nurse carried a freshwater jug. She checked the IV line, her gaze resting briefly on James with a soft smile. Mr. Carter, do you need anything? She asked warmly. James shook his head, his voice low and steady. Thank you. I'm fine. Evelyn gripped her handbag tighter, her nails digging deeper into the leather. Carter. She repeated, this time a little louder, as if daring him to respond. But James still said nothing. He continued holding Anna's hand, whispering, I'm here, Anna. Just like you always wanted. In this room filled with judgmental eyes and heavy silence, James Carter was Anna's last wall of strength, and he would not leave no matter what. Hospital room 304 had never felt more suffocating. The steady beeping of Anna Harper's heart monitor echoed like an anguished countdown, marking each fleeting moment. The early summer sunlight had grown faint, filtering weakly through the white silk curtains, casting pale streaks across the tiled floor, where the wedding ring on Anna's finger shimmered like a small flame refusing to die. James Carter still sat by her bedside, his hand clasping hers tightly, thumb gently caressing the fragile back of her hand, where pale skin revealed faint blue veins. His eyes, heavy with exhaustion, yet unwavering, stayed locked on Anna's face, as if he were willing her to stay by the sheer force of love. But the stillness in the room was only a thin shell, masking a storm on the verge of eruption. Evelyn Harper, Anna's mother, sat upright in her leather chair, the pearl necklace around her neck gleaming like armor. But her eyes were sharper than ever. She no longer attempted to hide her displeasure. Her glare bore into James, settling on the hand that held her daughter's. The wedding ring on Anna's hand, mirrored by the ring on James's, was a challenge she could no longer bear. She gripped her handbag tightly, her manicured nails digging into the leather, as though trying to restrain a rage about to boil over. Robert, Anna's father, remained by the window, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the parking lot below, but his shoulders trembled slightly, as if he too sensed the rising tension. Lily, Anna's younger sister, sat curled in the corner, her eyes shifting between her sister and James, curious, yet anxious, as if she sensed something was about to happen. The door opened softly, and Evelyn rose to her feet, her high heels clicking across the tiled floor with authority. Behind her came a young priest, clad in a long black robe, holding a Bible in his arms, his expression uncertain, as he stepped into the oppressive air of the room. Evelyn turned to him, her voice cold but tightly controlled. She would want a final prayer. Please begin. Then she glanced at James, her eyes like blades. He can step out. The phrase he can landed like an accusation, as if James's presence as a black man was a violation of the Harper family's sacred moment. James didn't move. He held Anna's hand, his eyes fixed on her face, as if Evelyn's words were nothing more than a passing breeze. Evelyn stepped closer, her voice sharper now, like a knife slicing through the air. "This is a family matter. You do not belong here." Her words carried a racial prejudice she didn't bother to disguise. Robert coughed louder this time, but didn't turn around, wanting any part of the confrontation. Lily looked up, eyes wide, her hands gripping her knees, but she didn't dare speak. The tension in the room stretched tight like a wire ready to snap with a single touch. But before James could respond, a soft yet resolute voice came from the doorway. She asked for him to stay. Nurse Sarah, her name tag gleaming on her white blouse, stepped into the room with calm authority. She looked Evelyn straight in the eye without flinching. "Mr. Carter is not just a guest. He is Ms. Harper's legal husband, listed in her medical records and advance directive." Sarah's words cut through the silence like lightning, stunning the room. Evelyn spun around, her eyes, wide pearls trembling slightly, as she inhaled sharply. Robert finally turned his gaze, darting between Sarah and James, as if struggling to believe what he'd just heard. Lily blinked, her hands loosening, eyes shifting to James with astonishment and curiosity. James still said nothing. Quietly, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a neatly folded piece of paper, its edges slightly worn with age. He unfolded it slowly but surely, holding it toward the light. Anna's signature, clear and elegant, rested beneath the printed line, "James Carter, husband, next of kin." The sunlight fell on the page, highlighting the black ink, like a truth too bright to deny. Evelyn stared at the document, her lips trembling, but no sound escaped. She stepped back, clutching her handbag tighter, as if that paper had shattered the wall she had spent years constructing. The priest, visibly unsure, looked from James to Evelyn, then to Sarah. Finally, he spoke, his voice hesitant. Would you like to join the prayer?" The question was directed at James for the first time, acknowledging his rightful presence. James nodded, his voice low and gentle. Anna believed in grace. Please do what she would want. He didn't look at Evelyn or Robert or Lily. His gaze remained solely on Anna, his hand still firmly holding hers, as though nothing could pull him away from her. Evelyn stood frozen, her eyes bouncing between the paper in James's hand and the wedding ring on Anna's finger, the thing she had ignored the entire day. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. She turned away and sat down again, her trembling hands resting on her handbag, as if trying to reclaim control. Robert stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder, though his eyes still avoided James, as if he wasn't ready to face the truth. Lily, for the first time, didn't look away. She looked directly at James, her eyes shimmering with a new curiosity, as though she had just discovered that her sister had lived a story she never knew. The priest began to pray, his voice soft, blending with the rhythmic beeping of the machines. James bowed his head, his lips brushing against the back of Anna's hand, as he whispered, "I'm here, Anna, just like you always wanted." In this room, surrounded by judgmental glances and fractured silence, James Carter was no longer invisible. He was Anna's husband, chosen by her, loved by her, and no one could take that away from him. Hospital room 304 remained steeped in heavy silence, even after the priest's prayer had ended, leaving behind a void filled only by the steady beeping of Anna Harper's heart monitor. The early summer light was nearly gone now, leaving only faint streaks on the tiled floor, where the wedding ring on Anna's finger glimmered dimly, like a flame about to die out. James Carter sat motionless by her bed, his hand clasping hers tightly, his thumb gently caressing the fragile back of her hand, where pale skin exposed faint blue veins. His eyes, weary but resolute, never left her face, as if he could somehow hold her here with the strength of his love. But in his mind, painful memories surged, telling the story of a hidden love and their sacrifices to protect one another. James remembered the early days of their love, when everything was still simple, before the Harper family's racial prejudice became an insurmountable wall. He had met Anna in a small cafe in Atlanta where he worked part-time to pay his law school tuition. She had walked in her light blonde hair tousled by the wind and ordered a latte with a bright, radiant smile. James was captivated by how she spoke and laughed when he joked about her always ordering the same drink. They started talking then, dating, and before long, James knew he had found the person he wanted to spend his life with. But Anna, though deeply in love, always carried a fear, not of James, but of her family, who would never accept a black man as her partner. "I don't want you to endure those stares," Anna once said on a quiet night as they sat on the couch in their small apartment. The warm yellow light cast a glow on her face, but her eyes were filled with worry. "My mother won't see you as James, the man I love. She'll only see your skin color, and she'll hurt you." James had held her hand and whispered, "I can bear it, Anna, as long as you're with me." But she shook her head, tears trailing down her cheeks. "I don't want you to bear anything. I want to protect you." That was why she hid him, not out of shame, but because she knew her family, with their deep-rooted prejudice, would turn their love into a battlefield. James recalled a Christmas 3 years ago when Anna returned to Savannah for a family dinner. She had always slipped her wedding ring into her purse and told them she couldn't stay long due to work. When she returned to their apartment, her eyes were red. Mascara streaked across her cheeks. James knew something had gone wrong. She clung to him, sobbing. "Mom tried to set me up again with someone more suitable. She said I needed someone worthy of the Harper name. I wanted to scream that I already had you, James, but I couldn't. I didn't want them to hurt you." James had held her as she cried in his arms. He made her favorite butternut squash soup, sat beside her on the couch, and listened as she recounted her mother's cutting words, her father's complicit silence, and Lily's quiet curiosity that never turned into questions. "Have you ever regretted it?" Anna asked, her voice trembling. James kissed her forehead. "Never, Anna. I only regret that you have to bear the pain alone." Those memories, though painful, were proof of their love. James remembered a night when the power had gone out, and they sat by candlelight in their apartment, giggling as they tried to cook on the old gas stove. Anna leaned her head on his shoulder and whispered, "If I told my family about you, they wouldn't understand. They'd only see what they want to see, a man who doesn't belong in their world. But you are my world, James." He had held her hand, feeling the cold band of her wedding ring, and promised to always be by her side, whether the world accepted them. But deep down, he knew Anna longed for the day she could openly wear her wedding ring in front of her family without fear. Back in the hospital room, James could feel Evelyn's eyes, cold as knives, still cutting into him, even as she sat stunned by the document he had revealed. She clutched her handbag fingernails, digging into the leather, as though trying to reclaim the control she had just lost. Robert stood beside her, one hand on her shoulder, but his eyes still avoided James's, as if he wasn't ready to face the truth. Lily, sitting in the corner, no longer bowed her head. She looked at James, her gaze shining with a new curiosity, as if she were trying to understand the man her sister had chosen. But James paid no attention to them. He looked only at Anna, whispering, "You chose me, Anna, and I won't let them take that away." The door opened quietly. A nurse entered carrying a fresh blanket. She looked at James with a gentle expression. "Carter, do you need anything?" James shook his head, his voice calm and low. "Thank you. I'm fine." Evelyn muttered again, just loud enough for James to hear Carter. The word rang out like an accusation, but he didn't respond. He bowed and pressed his lips to the back of Anna's hand. His wedding ring shimmered like a silent answer. In this room, surrounded by judgment and fractured silence, James Carter was the only one who truly understood Anna. And he would stay, no matter what. Gray skies loomed over the backyard of the Harper home in Savannah, where old oak trees swayed in the wind, as if whispering stories that had never been told. Anna Harper's funeral had ended hours ago, leaving behind a heavy stillness, as if the air still held the scent of carnations and unspeakable sorrow. The Harper family gathered in the living room, where the dim chandelier light fell upon perfectly arranged family photos atop the fireplace. Evelyn Harper sat in an armchair, hands tightly clasped the pearl necklace around her neck, glinting like armor, but her eyes were hollow, as if she were clinging to an image of Anna she had constructed in her mind. Robert, Anna's father, stood by the window, holding a cup of cold tea, his gaze fixed on the darkness outside. Lily, Anna's younger sister, sat on the sofa clutching a pillow, her eyes scanning the room as if searching for a missing piece. Lily stood up and walked into Anna's old study, a place her sister had always loved for its quiet and the freedom it offered. The room was dusty, its shelves filled with novels and old journals. Lily didn't know what she was looking for. She only wanted to feel Anna again. She opened the desk's bottom drawer, and immediately her eyes fell on a cream-colored envelope resting atop a worn blue journal. On the envelope, in Anna's delicate handwriting, were the words, "To my family. Read after I'm gone." Lily's heart pounded. She hesitated, her fingers trembling as they touched the envelope, as if she knew the contents would change everything. She brought the envelope into the living room, her voice shaky as she broke the silence. "Mom, Dad, I found this. It's a letter from Anna." Evelyn looked up, her eyes widening, the pearls around her neck trembling slightly as she drew a sharp breath. "A letter?" she asked, her voice sharp but tinged with worry. Robert turned around his cup, tilting slightly in his hand, eyes flicking between Lily and the envelope. Lily sat on the sofa, hands trembling as she opened the envelope and took out a neatly folded piece of paper. Anna's handwriting was clear and complete of life, as if she were still here. Lily took a deep breath, then began to read, her voice unsteady but resolute. "If you're holding this letter, then I'm already gone. I struggled for a long time with the decision to write it, but there are things I couldn't say while I was alive. Now I have nothing left to lose." The room fell silent. The only sounds were the wind howling through the window and Lily's voice slicing through the facade of the Harper family like a blade. "You never truly knew James, but I did. I knew every part of him, the way he made me laugh when I was scared, the way he listened without judgment, the way he made me feel safe in a world that told us our love was a mistake. You think I hid him because I was ashamed. That's not true. I hid him to protect him from your contemptuous glances, whispered comments, and polite smiles that never reached your eyes." Evelyn clenched her hands, nails digging into her palms, her eyes flicking between Lily and the letter, as though she wanted to snatch it and tear it apart. Robert bowed his head, the cup trembling in his grip, a few drops of tea spilling over the edge. Lily continued, her voice now choked with emotion. "I was diagnosed with my illness a year ago. I didn't tell you because I knew what would happen. The arguments, the control, the cold comfort. Instead, I chose another path. James and I remarried at a small chapel near the lake, just the two of us. I wore white, and he cried as he read his vows. It was the happiest day of my life, even though I knew it would be one of my last." Lily paused, tears streaming down her face. She looked at Evelyn, then at Robert, pleading silently for them to understand. She continued, "You may think James isn't family, but he is. He was my real family, the only one who stayed with me until the end. If you still believe he was a mistake, that's your right. But know this. My final wish was to have him hold my hand as I left this world. And he did, even knowing what he would face once I was gone. Let go of your prejudice. It's too late for me, but not for you. With love, Anna. Silence blanketed the room, heavy as a steel curtain. Evelyn sat frozen, her lips trembling, the pearls around her neck quivering as if they too felt the shock. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Robert wiped his glasses, though they were already clean, and tears fell down his cheeks for the first time in years. Lily clutched the letter to her chest, sobbing as if Anna's words had opened a door she never knew had been locked. She remembered all the times Anna tried to talk about someone special, and how she never listened, too absorbed in her world. Now she only wished she could go back and ask, "Who is James, and why did you love him?" The room remained silent, but it was no longer the silence of judgment like in the hospital. It was the silence of awakening, however late. Anna's letter, like a flame, had burned down the wall of prejudice the Harper family had built, leaving them with the raw truth of her love for James, a black man they had never wanted to know. And in that silence, one question remained unspoken. What would they do with the truth, now that Anna could no longer see it? The Harper family's living room in Savannah sat in heavy silence, as though Anna Harper's letter had drained all the air from the room, leaving behind only the sound of the wind whistling through the windows and the pounding of hearts grappling with truth. The dim chandelier lit the carefully arranged family photos on the mantel, where Anna smiled in frozen moments of orchestrated perfection. Yet now that smile seemed to carry a sorrow they had never noticed. The letter lying on the coffee table was a flame that had burned down the wall of prejudice the Harper family had spent years building, leaving them face to face with a raw truth. Anna had loved James Carter, a black man, and they had never wanted to know him. Evelyn Harper sat frozen in her armchair. Her hands tightly clasped the pearl necklace around her neck, trembling, as if it too could feel the tremor in her soul. Her lips quivered, and her eyes darted between the letter and the space beyond, searching for an excuse to justify the years she had spent ignoring her daughter. Anna's words, "I hid him to protect him from your contemptuous stares," echoed in her head, sharp as a blade. Evelyn remembered all the times she had forced Anna to meet men she deemed suitable, men she believed worthy of the Harper name. She remembered Anna's averted eyes, her quiet sadness, and how she had never once asked why. Now Evelyn realized she had never wanted to ask, because the truth would have shattered the perfect picture she had crafted. She opened her mouth to speak, but her throat was dry, and Evelyn Harper felt her sense of control crumbling for the first time. Robert, Anna's father, stood motionless at the window, the cold cup of tea in his hand, shaking slightly, a few drops spilling over the rim. He wiped his glasses, though they were clean, and tears slid silently down his face like the rain outside. He thought of Anna, his eldest daughter, always quiet during family dinners, always refusing holiday invitations, with vague excuses about work. He had once seen that as independence, something to be proud of, but Anna's letter made him see how wrong he'd been. He remembered a time when Anna was a little girl, sitting on his lap and asking Daddy, "Why do people hate each other for being different?" He had laughed and told her it was just how the world worked, but he had never realized that he had helped build that very world through silence, through his quiet agreement with Evelyn's views. His tears were not just for losing Anna, but for losing the chance to know her honestly. Lily, Anna's younger sister, clutched the letter to her chest, tears streaking her cheeks and smudging her sister's ink. She sobbed not from grief alone, but from the guilt that scorched her heart. She remembered all the times Anna had tried to talk about someone special, the light in her eyes when she spoke of trips far away, but Lily hadn't listened. She'd been too caught up in her own life, in parties and fleeting relationships, thinking of Anna as the distant, inscrutable older sister. Now she understood that Anna had lived a different life, a life full of love and sacrifice, and she had never cared to see it. "I'm sorry," Anna Lily whispered, her voice shaking, as though Anna could still hear her. She looked again at the letter, reading the words, "James is my real family," and felt a sharp ache in her chest. She wanted to meet James and ask him about Anna and her missed moments. Silence blanketed the room again, but it was no longer the silence of judgment like in the hospital. This was the silence of awakening, however belated, of hearts wrestling with regret and truth. Evelyn finally moved her trembling hand, reaching up to touch her pearls, as if they could restore her lost control. She looked at Lily, her voice hoarse. "Why didn't you say anything earlier? Why didn't you know about that man?" There was a hint of accusation in her voice, but Lily shook her head, tears still falling. "Mom, she tried to tell us, but we didn't listen. We didn't want to listen." Lily's words struck like a blade, making Evelyn recoil, her eyes vacant like someone forced to stare into a mirror and see the truth about herself. Robert stepped forward and set the cup of tea down on the table. His voice was shaky. "We were wrong, Evelyn. We never saw who Anna was." He looked at the letter, as if it were a piece of Anna he had never been able to touch. She loved that man. And we pushed her into a corner. Evelyn turned away, her eyes glistening with tears, but she still couldn't admit it. "I can't," she murmured, her voice weak. "I can't accept, not like this." But her tone no longer held the icy sharpness it once did, only the desperation of a mother, realizing she had lost her daughter, not just to death, but to years of not understanding her. Lily stood up and placed the letter on the table, her gaze steady despite tears streaming down her face. "She loved him, Mom, and he loved her. We can't change the past, but we can do something now, for her." She looked at Evelyn, then at Robert, as though begging them to step beyond the wall of prejudice that Anna had tried so hard to cross. The room fell silent once more, but this time there was a flicker of hope, like the candle Anna and James used to light during power outages. Anna's letter was not just a rebuke. It was an invitation. It is an invitation for the Harper family to face their mistakes and choose to heal, even though Anna was no longer here to see it. Under the soft golden sunlight of an early summer afternoon, the cemetery on the outskirts of Savannah lay quiet, with only the wind rustling through the old oak trees, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass and the memories of those who had passed. James Carter strolled along the gravel path, the faint creak of his worn leather shoes marking a somber rhythm that blended with birdsong in the distance. In his hands was a bouquet of white carnations, Anna's favorite, carefully tied with a pale blue ribbon, the color of the dress she wore on their wedding day. He was in no rush. He had never rushed when it came to Anna, not in the days they were together, and not now, when she lived only as a memory carved in stone. Anna's grave rested beneath the shade of an ancient oak, simple yet elegant, just as she would have wanted. The gray headstone bore the inscription, "Anna Harper, deeply loved, forever returning." James knelt gently, running his fingers across the stone, feeling its chill beneath his touch. He brushed away a few dry leaves that had fallen over the grave, as if tending to a living part of Anna that remained. He placed the bouquet carefully at the base, arranging it carefully, then reached into his coat pocket for a small wedding photo framed in thin glass. In the photo, Anna leaned her head on his shoulder on Tybee Beach, her smile radiant like sunlight, while he smiled softly at her, as if she were his entire world. He set the photo beside the grave, using a smooth stone to weigh it against the wind. "Hi, sweetheart." "James," whispered his voice, deep and gentle, as if Anna were sitting beside him. "I went back to our beach last week. The wooden bench is still there. Your name's still carved in the corner. I sat for a while. Remembered how you laughed when the waves soaked your feet. He paused, his eyes blurring with unshed tears. The water's still cold, just like you said, but you still ran into it, never afraid. He smiled a sad, loving smile. Memories of Anna washed over him like waves, the way she held his hand when they carved their names into the bench, the way she whispered, "You are my home," the night they secretly remarried by the lake, the way she giggled as they shared butternut squash soup by candlelight. James sat down on the grass, leaning against the headstone, as if sitting beside her on the couch in their old apartment. He remembered the days they had to hide their love, when Anna slipped her wedding ring into her purse before visiting the Harper family, who would never accept a black man like him. He remembered the pain in her eyes after returning from Savannah and hearing her mother Evelyn speak again of someone suitable. But Anna had never wavered. "They don't need to understand, James," she once told him, her fingers locked with his. "As long as you do." And he did. He had known her better than anyone, and that was why he was here beside her, even after she was gone. He looked at the wedding photo, his finger gently touching the glass, as if trying to touch Anna one more time. "They don't need to know me, love," he whispered. "You knew me. That was enough." The wind stirred, rustling the bouquet of white carnations, as if Anna were answering. James closed his eyes, letting the memories fill him, their secret courthouse wedding in Atlanta, the trip to Tybee Beach, the night the power went out, and they laughed in the candlelight. Though hidden from the world, these moments were the proof of their love, a love that needed no approval from the Harper family or the world. No one else was at the cemetery today. James hadn't expected them. He knew the Harpers, bound by deep-rooted prejudice, had ignored him in the hospital, and he didn't expect them to change. But he didn't need them. He had Anna, and she had given him everything: love, courage, and a reason to keep going, even with a shattered heart. He opened his eyes, looked at the headstone, and whispered, "I'll come back, okay?" Like always. He stood brushing the dust from his knees and looked at the grave one last time, his eyes filled with love and peace. In the distance, the gravel crunched beneath the footsteps of another person. But James didn't turn around. He didn't know that from a quiet corner of the cemetery, someone was watching him. Someone who would carry the story of him and Anna beyond this place, like a wind scattering seeds into new soil. Beneath the oak tree, Anna's grave lay still, accompanied by a bouquet of white carnations and a wedding photo, a lasting reminder that their love, though hidden, would live forever. The sky above the cemetery on the outskirts of Savannah was tinted a soft golden hue as early summer sunlight filtered through the oak branches, casting shifting patches of light and shadow on the gravel path. The wind whispered gently, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass and the stillness of a place that held memories. James Carter had just left Anna Harper's grave, where he had placed a bouquet of white carnations and a wedding photo beneath the old oak tree, an eternal promise in silence. But he didn't know that from a quiet corner of the cemetery, a pair of eyes had quietly watched him, drawn into the love story he and Anna had written, even though the world had once ignored it. Sarah Rios, a nurse who had cared for Anna during her final days at the hospital, stood by her grandfather's grave, just a few rows away. She had come to lay down a bunch of violets, his favorite flower. But her gaze was drawn to James, the black man, kneeling beside Anna's grave. She recognized him instantly, the gentle-eyed man who had always held Anna's hand in the hospital room, undeterred by Evelyn Harper's icy stares. Sarah remembered the moment she walked into room 304, when Evelyn demanded James leave so a prayer could be held, and how Sarah had spoken up. "He's her husband. It's on the paperwork." She recalled Evelyn's stunned silence, Robert's quiet withdrawal, and James quietly producing a document signed by Anna, affirming that he was indeed her true family. Watching James kneel by the grave today, Sarah felt something deeper stir inside her. She noticed how he brushed away dead leaves, carefully placed the carnations, and whispered to Anna, as if she were still there. She saw the small wedding photo where Anna leaned against James's shoulder, smiling like sunlight. James's actions weren't rooted in grief alone. They were a full presence, a love that transcended death. Sarah stood still, her hand over her chest, feeling her heart beat harder. She thought of Anna, the woman who had chosen to love James, despite her family's racial prejudice, and of James, who remained steadfast in that love, even though the Harper family never accepted him. Sarah remembered the hospital days, seeing James sit for hours at Anna's side, whispering love, even when she could no longer respond. She remembered how he tucked her hair behind her ear and held her hand, like it was the only thing keeping him upright. She remembered Evelyn's contemptuous glances. She muttered, Carter laced with suspicion, and Robert's complicit silence. But above all, she remembered Anna, the shimmer of her wedding ring, a silent declaration that she had chosen James against all odds. Seeing James at the cemetery today, full of quiet strength and unwavering love, made Sarah realize their love wasn't just the story of two people. It was a flame that could inspire others. She pulled her phone from her pocket, her fingers hesitating over the screen. She thought about her mother, someone she hadn't spoken to much since moving to Savannah for work. She remembered their petty arguments and the many calls she avoided out of fear of being judged. But looking at James, who had loved Anna despite everything, Sarah felt a powerful urge rise in her. She dialed. Her voice trembled as her mother answered, Mom, it's me. No, nothing's wrong. I just wanted to say I love you. Let's not let small things keep us apart. Okay. She heard her mother's voice soften, and for the first time in months, they spoke as if the distance had never existed. Sarah ended the call, tears rolling down her cheeks, but she smiled. She looked toward Anna's grave, where James had just been, and felt she had been given a gift of connection, of courage to love and forgive. She didn't know about Anna's letter, and she didn't know that the Harper family was grappling with the truth back in their Savannah home. But she knew that the love between James and Anna, even if hidden from the world, had reached her like a wave rippling outward, touching one heart at a time. She walked away, leaving the bouquet of violets at her grandfather's grave, but carrying the story of James and Anna. The story whispered that true love can change things, even if only one heart at a time. Beneath the oak tree, Anna's grave lay still. The white carnations and the wedding photo glimmered in the sunlight, a quiet testament that their love, though ignored by the world, still lived on, touched strangers, and whispered with the wind. The Harper home in Savannah was cloaked in darkness, with only the soft glow of a desk lamp spilling from Anna Harper's old study, where dusty shelves still held memories of her. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck once, the chime echoing like a solemn reminder of time past and chances lost. Lily Harper. Anna's younger sister sat at the desk. In front of her lay a worn-out blue journal and a blank sheet of paper. Anna's letter, read days ago after the funeral, still rested on the desk. Her elegant handwriting, a flame that illuminated truths Lily had never dared face. Anna had loved James Carter, a black man, and the Harper family had pushed her into silence. Lily held her head in her hands, tears streaming down her face, smudging the ink on a sheet she had written and then torn apart. She remembered the light in Anna's eyes when she spoke of distant travels, but Lily had never asked. She remembered Anna returning from Atlanta, carrying a quiet joy, but Lily had assumed it was work. Now Anna's words, "I hid him to protect him from your contemptuous stares," stabbed into her heart. Lily was drowning in regret for not listening, for allowing her mother Evelyn with her racial prejudices to dictate the family narrative. She wishes to go back and ask Anna about James and the love that made her sister choose secrecy. She opened Anna's journal, flipping to a near final page where a small photo had been carefully taped. In it, Anna and James sat at a cafe, sunlight pouring through the window and illuminating their faces. Anna leaned into James's shoulder, her smile radiant, while James looked at her with tenderness, as if she were his entire world. Underneath the photo, Anna had written, "The day James made me laugh so hard my stomach hurt. He is my home." Lily touched the photo, her fingers trembling, a sharp ache rising in her chest. She realized Anna had never smiled like that at family dinners in Savannah, where their mother forced her into the mold of a proper young woman. She remembered the hospital, how James held Anna's hand unshaken by Evelyn's cold stare. She remembered the moment Nurse Sarah revealed James was Anna's husband, and how he quietly presented a document signed by her sister. Lily had been curious, but fear of her mother's scolding kept her silent. Now she regretted that silence deeply. Anna's letter wasn't just a revelation. It was a wake-up call, not only for Evelyn and Robert, but for her. She couldn't change the past, but she could do something now to honor the love between Anna and James, and to begin mending the damage her family had done. She pulled out a fresh sheet of paper, took a deep breath, and began to write. Her handwriting trembled, but each word was firm and sincere. Dear James, I am Lily, Anna's younger sister. I don't know how to begin, but I need to say I'm sorry. I didn't know about you. I didn't know about your love for my sister until I read the letter she left behind. I regret not listening to her and allowing my family to silence her. Her letter told me about you, how you made her laugh, how you were her true family. I want to know more about her through you. If you're willing, I'd like to meet you to hear about the moments I missed. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I want to do what's right for Anna. Sincerely, Lily, Harper. Lily folded the letter, her hands shaking as she slipped it into an envelope. She didn't know how to find James, but was determined to try. She thought of Anna, of the smile in the photo, and felt a small flicker of hope. She knew her mother Evelyn still wrestled with prejudice, and her father Robert remained quietly steeped in regret. But Lily didn't want to be part of that silence anymore. She wanted to step through the wall Anna had tried hard to break, even if just a single step. She stood and switched off the lamp, letting the room fade into darkness. The letter remained on the desk next to the journal and photo, like a quiet promise that she would not let Anna and James's love be forgotten. Outside the window, wind rustled through the oaks, carrying with it a whisper, as if Anna were smiling, knowing her little sister was finally listening. Beneath the old oak tree at the cemetery on the outskirts of Savannah, the early summer sunlight streamed through the leaves, casting a gentle halo over Anna Harper's grave. The gray tombstone engraved with the words, "Anna Harper deeply loved forever," returning, stood quietly among the green grass, a silent witness to the love between her and James Carter. The bouquet of white carnations James had left just a day before was still fresh, its petals gently trembling in the breeze, as if Anna were whispering back. Beside it was a small wedding photo framed in glass, capturing Anna resting her head on James's shoulder at Tybee Beach, her smile radiant like the sun, and him gazing at her with tender eyes, as if she were his entire universe. The sunlight hit the photo, making it sparkle like a tiny flame that refused to be extinguished despite the years they had spent hiding their love from a world full of prejudice. The wind swept through the cemetery, rustling the leaves like a lullaby sung by the departed. It brushed past the bouquet, causing a carnation petal to fall to the grass, a gentle reminder that Anna and James's love endured even in life's fragility. Though slightly faded at the corners, the wedding photo remained vivid at its heart, as if time could not erase the moment they chose each other. James, the black man who had stood by Anna despite the contemptuous stares from the Harper family, was not physically there, but his presence lingered in the flowers in the photo, in the inscription carved into stone. He had lived that love from the secret days in Atlanta to the final hours in the hospital, and now he had etched it into the world beneath this tree. Miles away in a small apartment in Atlanta, James sat on the sofa clutching Anna's scarf, still scented faintly with her favorite perfume, a blend of orange blossom and jasmine. He closed his eyes, letting the memories wash over him. Their courthouse wedding, the trip to Tybee Beach, the blackout night when they laughed over candlelight, and the moment Anna whispered, "You are my home," during their lakeside vow renewal. He remembered the letter she had left at the hospital, not for him, but for her family. Yet he didn't need to read it. He had lived every word of it, every day and every moment she had belonged to him. He didn't yet know that back in Savannah, Lily, Anna's younger sister, had written a letter to him. A small but brave step toward breaking down the wall of prejudice the Harper family had built. But whether or not that letter ever reached him, James had found peace. He knew Anna had loved him, and that was enough for him to carry on. The lamp in Anna's old study remained lit at the Harper home. Lily's letter rested on the desk beside Anna's journal and the wedding photo. Though she hadn't sent the letter yet, Lily had decided to find James, hear about her sister, and understand the love she had once ignored. Evelyn, Anna's mother, still wrestled with her prejudice, but her once sharp eyes no longer held the same bite. Anna's letter had planted a small, yet undeniable seed in her heart. Robert, Anna's father, had begun to speak of her more often, sharing childhood stories, as if trying to make up for years of silence. The Harper family slowly but surely changed because of the love between Anna and James, a love that had broken their silence. At the cemetery, a young woman passed by Anna's grave, her gaze stopping at the wedding photo. It was Sarah Rios, the nurse who had witnessed James in the hospital and later at the cemetery. After that call to her mother, she reconciled with her own family. Today she returned to thank Anna and James, if only silently. She gently touched the bouquet of carnations, smiled, and whispered, "Thank you, both of you." Her small gesture was a testament that Anna and James's love had spread beyond themselves, touching strangers' hearts like seeds carried on the wind to distant soil. In the golden sunlight, the wedding photo shimmered, as if the universe itself bowed before their love. The wind stirred the oak's canopy above, and the rustling leaves sounded like a lullaby, carrying their story into eternity. No more secrets, no more prejudice. Only love, gentle, unwavering, eternal. Anna's grave lay still, but her and James's story lived on in the photo, in the bouquet, in the hearts of those who had heard their whispered truth. And somewhere in the sunlight and the wind, Anna and James were still smiling, hand in hand, as they always had.